Let's start with why conservatives seem to be rooting against America these days. Clarence Page is with the Chicago, did I say Chicago? Chicago Tribune, and Terry Jeffrey is not. He's with CNNsNews.com. Gentlemen, let's take a look now at some things here. Here is a conservative group getting the news about the Olympic bid this Friday. Let's listen.
If anyone cares, Chicago is out. Chance at even negotiating. They were out on the first vote.
Well, there they are clapping. In fact, we missed a clapping scene there. It continued in that line. They seem to be enjoying the news that Obama, the president, and Chicago and the United States had failed in its Olympic bid to do Rio de Janeiro. Anyway, a Weekly Standard blog, that's the right-wing or neocon Weekly Standard, their blog went out right after Chicago was passed over, and the original headline on their blog was, Chicago loses, and included this news bulletin, cheers erupt at Weekly Standard World Headquarters. Well, there you have it. There's more along this line. We're going to have Rush Limbaugh along that line in a couple of minutes, but that's the beginning of this conversation. What is it, Terry, that seems to excite almost to an orgiastic level the right about the failure of America to get the Olympic bid last week? Is this that they're just rooting for any failure of Obama?
I don't think the city of Chicago getting the Olympics is synonymous with a vital national interest of the United States. I mean, you could be from Chicago and not want the Olympics to come to Chicago. I think what you saw conservatives happy about there is they saw hubris brought low. There's something disproportionate about the President of the United States at a time when he's not making up his mind about how we're going to change our strategy in Afghanistan and whether we're going to reinforce the forces there, as General McChrystal wants, flying off to Copenhagen to try and lobby an International Olympic Committee on whether a single city in the United States is going to get games 8 years from now. So I think that what people were reacting to was what they see as the hubris of President Obama being brought down.
I've been around a long time, Chris. The first time I've seen Americans cheering over America not getting the Olympics. These aren't the Chicago Olympics. Those uniforms don't say Chicago. They say USA. And that's what you usually hear, you know, that kind of mass disappointment. This episode kind of reminds me, Terry, of the first O.J. Simpson verdict, when you had the split screen with people cheering on one side and crying on the other. You know, this is that kind of a contrast here.
Well, let's take a look. We have Rush Limbaugh. Can we show him reacting to this thing on Friday? He was quite in a dither over this. In fact, he was wallowing in it. Good word for him. Here we go. Here's Rush Limbaugh wallowing in the news that Chicago had failed to get the Olympic bid. This is Friday.
The world has rejected Obama. Chicago, the least number of votes. First elimination in the round of voting for the Olympics in 2016. Barack Hussein Obama. Barack Hussein Obama have been running around the world for 9 months telling everybody how much our country sucks. Why would anybody award the Olympics to such a crappy place as the United States of America?
Terry Jeffrey for the defense.
Well, you know what? I think Rush.
That was good for the country.
I think Rush makes an excellent point. I think one thing that I do, and I think one thing what he's pointing to, and I think it's something Americans ought to be very worried about with President Obama right now, is his going off to Copenhagen to lobby to get the Olympics for his hometown and failing to get it shows a serious lack of prudence, Chris. Right. And Rush made the point: this guy's going to negotiate with the Iranians. Right now, the guy's trying to negotiate with the Iranians to stop a nuclear program that's probably headed toward the Iranians getting a nuclear weapon. Yet this guy cannot even predict what the International Olympic Committee is going to do when he shows up and talks to them face to face. You know, yes, that should be ridiculed in forums like talk radio, and Rush did an excellent job in pointing to that vulnerability we have with this guy in the White House.
I'm restraining myself. Go ahead.
Well, good for you, Chris. Very, very well. No, the IOC is hardly comparable to nuclear negotiations, which, by the way, went remarkably well last week, but that news was overshadowed because Americans care more about the Olympics right now, God bless us. You know, we're lucky that we can afford to do that. But the fact of the matter is that Obama went off as quickly as he could and came back as quickly as he could, and that's probably part of the reason why the IOC wasn't more impressed. He didn't spend more time there.
I think he probably knew that there were a lot of voters in the Olympic Committee who thought it's time for the Southern Hemisphere to have a shot.
Definitely.
African and Latin American kind of people who weren't white have a shot at it. They're tired of the same old countries getting it. He probably knew that. I think he knew also that it was his job, coming out of Chicago, to try at least. If Ronald Reagan had gone over and tried to get the Olympics for Los Angeles and it failed, would you guys be rooting? Would you be cheering that Reagan had failed? If Rudy Giuliani had rooted for New York like he always does, and appropriately so, if he had tried to get it for New York, would you be making fun of him?
But you know what, Chris? He didn't. And in fact, Ronald Reagan did not even negotiate with the Soviet Union until there was someone.
We're not talking about negotiating. This isn't about nuclear arms or negotiating with that. It's about a game.
Let me make my point. Ronald Reagan, in the first term of his presidency, put Pershing II missiles in Europe when he had.
What's this got to do with the Olympic Committee?
Let me make my point, Chris. I'll tell you what my point is. Ronald Reagan would not negotiate with any Soviet leader until they had a leader in place that he thought he actually could negotiate with. But he negotiated from a position of strength. When he went to Reykjavik...
This wasn't a negotiation.
Wait a minute. Yeah, let me draw a contrast here. When Ronald Reagan went to Reykjavik and Gorbachev said, we'll do all this provided you get rid of SCI, Reagan stood up and walked out in the leader of the Soviet Union. That helped bring the Cold War to an end with victory for the United States. That is an emblematic moment in Reagan's presidency. The most emblematic moment in Obama's presidency so far is his going to Copenhagen and having the International Olympic Committee slap him down.
He tried. I think Americans ought to get used to getting in the running with third world people having a right to vote. I think it's great that they get a right to vote.
Are these democratic countries that are getting a right to vote?
They're countries with sovereignty that have a right to issue a vote.
They're not democratic countries. They're not equal to this free and democratic republic.
Let me tell you,
we are not equivalent to that.
It's not about nuclear arms. Let's take a look at a couple of things here. I want to take a look at Lindsey Graham taking on Glenn Beck on this issue. I think we should take a look at that right now because I think there's something going on. Well, let's take a look at Rush Limbaugh first. There seems to be a pattern out here that any time, well, let's go to Lindsey Graham. Here he is talking about Glenn Beck. Let's watch.
What do you think of Glenn Beck?
Only in America can you make that much money crying. Glenn Beck is not aligned with any party, as far as I can tell. He's aligned with cynicism.
Well, this is the whole question of whether the right is being pushed back by these people that just want the president to fail, as opposed to the people who run for office in this country, Republicans. Here's Glenn Beck responding to Lindsey Graham.
You know, there's a lot of things that I'll wear as a badge of honor. Lindsey Graham hating my guts is probably the highest honor I've ever received.
Well, I have no idea what that means, but let's take a look at Graham responding on Fox News Sunday yesterday.
What I am saying, he doesn't represent the Republican Party. You can listen to him if you like. I choose not to because, quite frankly, I don't want to go down the road of thinking our best days are behind us.
There seems to be a growing, well, not growing, an emerging possible split between Republicans and the far right. What do you think?
Well, you know, first of all, Lindsey Graham does not speak for the conservative movement. I can't speak for Mr. Beck. I don't even see his television program, so I can't judge what's happening there.
He's mostly on radio.
But you know, if you're a conservative because you're not strictly a Republican, you're looking at those Republicans who fight for conservative principles and conservative causes and what's going on in Congress if there are congressmen that conservatives like to see done. Lindsey Graham is not one of those people. He is not one of the leading fighters for the conservative movement in the United States Congress. He can speak for the Republican Party, that's fine. He doesn't speak for conservatives.
Well, I say good for Lindsey Graham. I've known him for a number of years. He's a man of principle, as is Terry, whom I've also known for a number of years. I'm only disappointed when the debate gets polluted by falsehoods and exaggerations like Beck there saying Lindsey Graham hates my guts. He doesn't hate his guts, you know, but that's how Beck makes money. He's a showman. It's unfortunate that the national debate gets polluted by show business and you get distortions like death panels that don't exist, but these become issues, and it gets people scared, and it's just unfortunate. This is what has happened, and I hope, you know, that at least the conservative movement can try to police its own house.
Let's go back to the loop. Let's take a look at Rush Limbaugh early this year talking about what his view is, the way he looks at the presidency of Barack Obama. And it's on his radio show.
So I'm thinking of replying to the guys, okay, I'll send you a response, but I don't need 400 words. I need 4. I hope he fails.
What do we make of that?
Well,
Just
Chris,
fails, period.
Well, no, wait, Chris, what Rush said immediately before that is President Obama, who would be coming into office shortly, had an agenda of taking over, having increased government control in the automobile industry, in the banking industry, in the healthcare industry. He didn't want to see the
agenda.
He's going to give it back, by the way. He's going to give it back.
Wait a minute.
He doesn't want to keep it.
Look, after this happened, President Obama took over General Motors. He offered a health care plan that had a public option where the government would be running a health care program that Michael Moore said would drive private health insurance companies out of business. Rush had specific agenda items that President Obama was forwarding. He said he was against them. He hoped they failed. I'm with